Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. As you know, it is already 2026. We're in the midterm election year. 9 months away from Election Day. 9 months today. And Donald Trump and members of his administration are already making moves to try to illegitimately take control of the American election system. Now, Trump doesn't want Republicans to lose the House and the Senate. One big reason in particular, I think, that he keeps making very clear.
You got to win the midterms. Because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
I don't think he's wrong, and I really think he's very obsessed with legacy right now, that he does not want to go for his third impeachment. He's obsessed with keeping control of Congress. I think, honestly, primarily for that reason, because it's not like he cares about passing legislation or cares about other people's electoral fortunes. But the thing is, he's obsessed about keeping Congress, and he has no real plan to do it normally or legitimately.
Hey guys, Adam is here. This is The Call. The one Trump spent his entire second term screaming about. The one he insisted could never happen. The one he called a witch hunt, a coup, an illegitimate attack on his presidency. It just happened. The United States Senate just voted 68-32 to convict Donald Trump on impeachment charges.
Nation's capital, the GOP-led House voted today to pass the Save America Act, the sweeping election bill championed by President Trump. The vote was 218-213, with all but one Democrat voting against the measure. If passed by the Senate and signed by Trump, the bill would require proof of citizenship to register to vote. House Speaker Mike Johnson, meanwhile, claims that anyone who opposes the measure wants to undermine democracy.
And the only people that oppose it are people who want to cheat our system, who want to participate in our elections illegally, unlawfully. And that's not fair to the American people.
The measure now heads to the U.S. Senate, where it is unlikely to gain the Democratic support needed to pass the chamber's 60-vote threshold.
68 senators. 18 Republicans joined every single Democrat to cross the two-thirds threshold required by the Constitution. For the first time in American history, a president has been removed from office through the impeachment process. This is not hypothetical. This is not speculation. This is not some future scenario we're warning you about. This is the live feed. This is the clerk reading the roll call. This is the gavel coming down on a presidency, and Washington is in absolute chaos because this was supposed to be impossible. Trump survived 2 impeachments before. Both times Republicans locked in behind him. Both times the Senate acquitted. Both times he walked out claiming total vindication. But this time is different. This time the evidence was too damning, the constitutional violations too brazen, the political pressure too intense. This time, enough Republican senators looked at the testimony, looked at the war powers violations, looked at the unauthorized Venezuela operation that killed civilians and embarrassed the nation, and said, I can't defend this anymore. I won't protect him anymore. This has to end. And now Trump, according to multiple reports, is absolutely erupting behind closed doors, refusing to accept the verdict, blasting the vote as a coup, claiming he's still the president regardless of what the Senate says. But that's not how this works. The Constitution doesn't offer appeals. There's no Supreme Court review. There's no do-over. 2/3 of the Senate voted to convict. The president is removed. Period. Full stop. End of story. J.D. Vance is about to take the oath of office. And the country is about to enter territory so uncharted that there aren't even maps for it. So let's rewind and understand how we got here. Because this didn't happen in a vacuum. This was months of pressure building, evidence accumulating, and Republican defenses crumbling one by one. It started with Venezuela. Trump launched a military operation without congressional approval, without constitutional authority, without any pretense of following the rules that have governed American war powers for 2 centuries. He just did it. Unilaterally. And it went catastrophically wrong. Civilian casualties, international condemnation, allies questioning whether America could be trusted, and Congress, both sides of the aisle, furious that the president had bypassed them entirely. So the House launched hearings. They brought in generals who testified that Trump ignored their warnings. They brought in former administration officials who described a president who believed congressional authorization was optional. They brought in Trump's own chief of staff, whose Vanity Fair admissions about weaponized prosecutions and fabricated scandals became the smoking gun that gave impeachment credibility it had previously lacked. And the testimony was devastating, not because Democrats were attacking Trump, but because Republicans were confirming the worst allegations. People who worked for him, who supported him, who voted for him, sitting under oath and describing a president who viewed himself as above the law. So the House voted to impeach. Abuse of power, violation of war powers, obstruction of Congress, and this time, a handful of Republicans joined Democrats. Not many, but enough to show the wall was cracking. Then the articles went to the Senate, and that's when the real drama began. Because Senate Republicans found themselves trapped between two impossible forces. On one side, the evidence, televised hearings, sworn testimony, a military operation gone wrong. Constitutional violations so clear that first-year law students could spot them. On the other side, their voters. The MAGA base that still worshipped Trump and would primary any senator who dared to cross him. And different senators made different calculations. The MAGA diehards, 32 of them, locked in immediately. No evidence would ever be enough. No testimony could move them. Trump could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue, and they'd ask why the victim was carrying bullets. But the other 18? They broke. Some were institutionalists who genuinely believed in congressional war powers and couldn't stomach a president who ignored them. Some were moderates from purple states facing tough re-elections and polling that showed swing voters horrified by Trump's conduct. Some were retiring senators with nothing left to lose, free to vote their conscience without fear of retribution. And as the trial progressed, as more evidence emerged, as public pressure intensified, these groups started moving. First, one Republican announced he'd vote to convict, then another, then 3 more. And suddenly there was momentum because it's easier to be the 5th Republican breaking ranks than the first. The dam didn't just crack, it shattered. And when the clerk called the roll, when each senator stood and announced their verdict, the unthinkable became reality. Democrats united, 50 votes to convict. But mixed in, Republican after Republican. Collins, Murkowski, Romney, and then the surprises. Senators from deep red states who knew this vote could end their careers but voted guilty anyway. Senators who defended Trump through 2 impeachments, through January 6th, through countless scandals, who finally looked at the Venezuela operation and said, "This is the line, I will not cross it." The final count, 68 to 32. 18 Republicans, 50 Democrats, 2/3 plus 1, convicted, removed, history. Now let's talk about what this actually means. Not symbolically, not historically, but practically. Because Donald Trump just lost everything the moment that gavel dropped. First, he's no longer president. Not in 10 days, not next week, not at the end of the term. Immediately. J.D. Vance is president. Secret Service protection shifts. Classified briefings stop. The nuclear codes are no longer his responsibility. He's a private citizen with a lot of security detail and a massive grudge. Second, the Senate can now hold a second vote, requiring only a simple majority to bar Trump from ever holding federal office again. No more 2028. No more comeback tours. No more, "I'm running one more time." If that vote passes, Trump's political career doesn't just end. It gets legally amputated. Third, every legal protection Trump enjoyed as president evaporates instantly. Those criminal investigations that were stalled, deferred, delayed because DOJ policy prevents prosecuting a sitting president? They accelerate. The January 6th case, the classified documents, Georgia, any other cases prosecutors were quietly building while waiting for this moment. Trump faces trial after trial as a private citizen without the powers of the presidency to obstruct, delay, or intimidate. Fourth, his grip on the Republican Party shatters into a million pieces. 18 Republican senators just voted to remove him. That's not a faction. That's 1/3 of the caucus. Half the Senate. A massive public permanent repudiation. The party is now at war with itself. MAGA versus institutionalists. Loyalists versus constitutionalists. those who defended Trump to the end versus those who finally said enough. And that war is going to be brutal, bloody, and defining for the next decade. Fifth, the entire political landscape for 2028 resets overnight. If Trump is barred from office, the Republican primary is wide open. Candidates who've been waiting in his shadow, afraid to challenge him, suddenly have room to run. DeSantis, Haley, others. The party fractures into multiple candidates, bitter primaries, contested conventions. Democrats, meanwhile, lose their favorite opponent. They spent years preparing to run against Trump, to make every election a referendum on his chaos and corruption. Now they have to pivot to someone new, someone without Trump's baggage, but without Trump's ability to alienate swing voters either. 2028 just became unpredictable, volatile, wide open. But here's where it gets genuinely terrifying, because Trump is not accepting this. He's already declared the vote illegitimate. He's calling it a coup. He's telling anyone who will listen that he's still the president. And his supporters believe him. Social media is erupting with calls for protests, for action, for violence if necessary to restore Trump to power. So what happens if Trump refuses to leave? What if he barricades himself in the White House and claims the presidency is still his? What if his supporters try to physically prevent J.D. Vance from taking office? The Constitution is clear. 2/3 conviction means removal, period. There's no appeal, there's no higher authority. The Senate's verdict is final. But Trump doesn't care about constitutional clarity. He never has. And we've never tested what happens when a president refuses to accept removal. Does the Secret Service physically remove him? Do they split into factions, some loyal to Trump, some to Vance? What about the military? Who do the generals recognize as commander-in-chief? Do we risk a fracture in the armed forces, in law enforcement, in the institutions that are supposed to be nonpartisan? These aren't hypothetical academic questions anymore. They're real. They're now. And we don't have good answers because this has never happened before. So here's where we are. The constitutional system just worked. A president who abused power was held accountable. The impeachment mechanism the founders designed functioned exactly as intended, but it barely worked. It took Trump launching an unauthorized war. It took his own chief of staff admitting he weaponizes prosecutions. It took 18 Republican senators ending their political careers. It took extreme circumstances and extraordinary courage, and even then, it was a knife's edge. That's not a system that's working well. That's a system that's barely functioning, held together by a handful of people willing to put country over party. And now we face the aftermath. A former president who won't accept he's been removed. A Republican Party at war with itself. A country forced to confront questions we never thought we'd have to answer. Trump is panicking because the impossible just happened. The Senate voted to convict. He's no longer president. And everything he spent a lifetime building, the power, the platform, the immunity, the identity, just evaporated in the time it took to read 68 names. History just happened. The United States removed a president, and nothing is ever going to be the same.